Radio Shack's collapse did not start with bankruptcy or empty shelves. It started when people stopped walking in and feeling more capable than when they arrived. For decades, Radio Shack was a physical utility for people who wanted to understand, fix, or build technology. The core thesis is simple. Once it stopped empowering creators and started chasing commodity buyers, collapse became inevitable. In 1921, two brothers, Theodore and Milton Deutschman, opened the doors to a cramped basement on Brattle Street in Boston. The space measured just 7,000 cubic feet, but it was packed with possibility. They called it Radio Shack, a name borrowed from the world of shipboard radio, where the Radio Shack meant the nerve center, the place where signals were sent and received, where problems were solved in real time. That spirit of making, fixing, and understanding was their real inventory. The Deutschmans weren't chasing trends or gadgets. They were building a lifeline for people who wanted to tinker, repair, and invent. Their customers were amateur radio operators, ship radio officers, and early experimenters who saw technology as something to be explored, not just consumed. The store shelves overflowed with vacuum tubes, resistors, coils, and crystal sets. If you needed a rare capacitor or a soldering iron, you could find it here, or order it from their growing mail order catalog, which soon reached across the country. Inside that basement, the feeling was tactile and electric. Drawers of parts, the faint smell of solder, the hum of shared curiosity. The catalog was more than a price list. It was a guidebook for the ambitious and the curious. Radio Shack wasn't just selling components, it was selling the sense that anyone could learn how things worked, and then make them work better. That capability, baked into the company's DNA, set it apart from the start. The store became a beacon for those who wanted to do more than buy. They wanted to build. And for a long time, that was enough to make a small shop on Brattle Street feel like the center of the technological universe. Charles Tandy stepped into Radio Shack's story in 1963, arriving not as a tinkerer, but as a believer in the power of hands-on possibility. For $300,000, he bought the struggling chain and saw something most missed: a nation hungry for the feeling of capability. Under Tandy, the company's shelves didn't just hold parts, they held potential. Resistors, capacitors, and soldering irons became the tools of self-reliance, and every small store became a neighborhood engine of invention. The business model was simple but radical. Stock thousands of components in compact spaces, keep the lights on with steady sales to hobbyists and repairmen, and let word of mouth do the rest. The profit wasn't just in the margins on a transistor, but in the steady return of customers who knew they'd find help and answers, not just goods. Tandy's vision scaled. By the mid-1970s, Radio Shack was opening new locations at a pace few could match, each one promising that same spark of empowerment. Then, in 1977, the TRS-80 arrived. Priced at $599.95, it was one of the first truly accessible home computers, a machine you could walk into a local store and take home that day. The response was electric. 10,000 units sold in the first month, lines out the door, and a new wave of creators learning BASIC after dinner. The TRS-80 wasn't just a product, it was a proof of concept for Radio Shack's real mission, giving ordinary people the tools to understand and shape the future. For a moment, the feeling scaled perfectly. The company was not just selling electronics, it was selling the sense that anyone could become a builder, a fixer, a maker. And for millions, that was the magic. By the late 1990s, something subtle but irreversible began to happen inside Radio Shack's walls. The drawers that once overflowed with resistors and capacitors started shrinking. Shelves once dense with possibility gave way to neat rows of finished gadgets, boxed, sealed, ready to use but not to understand. The store that had once been a haven for the curious now asked a different question. Would you like a cell phone plan with that? Pressure from big box giants and online retailers intensified. Instead of competing on knowledge and community, Radio Shack began to chase the same mass market products as everyone else. The pivot was sharp. By 2003, nearly half of all sales came from wireless phones and their endless accessories. The core business, the one built on empowering people to tinker and repair, became a shrinking corner, both physically and emotionally. The parts bins thinned out, replaced by displays for the latest flip phone or Bluetooth headset. Employees who once offered advice and soldering tips now pushed commission-driven bundles, reading from scripts instead of schematics. Shoppers noticed. The ritual of hunting for a rare diode or getting help troubleshooting a stubborn circuit faded into memory. In its place, customers compared phone prices, browsed generic chargers, and left as quickly as they came. The quiet promise that technology could be understood and shaped by anyone was replaced by the hum of transactional sameness. Something foundational was slipping away, not just a product line, but the very feeling that had once made Radio Shack matter. Inside the stores, everything changed. The bins of resistors and the quiet exchange of advice gave way to a new ritual, the upsell. By the early 2000s, Radio Shack's sales floor had become a stage for attach rate quotas and commission scripts. Employees who once helped you troubleshoot a stubborn circuit now asked if you wanted an extended warranty with your phone charger. The pressure was constant, measured not in customer satisfaction, but in the number of accessory bundles added to each sale. Turnover at the top became a revolving door, with 7 chief executives in just 9 years. Each new leader arrived with a fresh set of promises, but the soul of the place slipped further away. Staff who once took pride in solving problems now read from laminated cards, their technical knowledge replaced by sales tactics. Customers felt it. The unspoken pact that Radio Shack was a place where you could learn, fix, and build snapped. Then in August 2009, the company tried to patch the wound with a new name. The Shack was rolled out in a national campaign, trading decades of earned trust for a shot at relevance. The change was loud, but the message underneath was a quiet confession. The old Radio Shack was gone. The brand that once sold possibility now sold whatever might keep the lights on. The rebrand did not fool anyone. If anything, it made the loss obvious. The feeling of capability, the real product, had left the building, and no logo could bring it back. By the time Radio Shack tried to find its footing in the 2010s, escape was no longer an option. The company was trapped by its own footprint, a sprawling network of thousands of stores, each one locked into long-term leases that couldn't be broken at will. A single clause in a 2013 debt agreement set the ceiling. No more than 200 stores could close each quarter, even as sales evaporated and losses mounted. In 2014, management wanted to shutter over 1,000 locations, but creditors refused, hoping to protect their collateral. The result was paralysis. Every empty store became a slow leak in the hull, bleeding cash that might have funded a real turnaround. Meanwhile, outside those locked doors, a new generation was rediscovering the thrill of building and repairing. Arduino kits, Raspberry Pi boards, and 3D printers were fueling a global maker movement. Kids and adults crowded community workshops and scoured the internet for sensors and soldering irons, the very spirit Radio Shack once embodied. But the company, bound by debt and distracted by wireless contracts, barely noticed. Bankruptcy arrived in February 2015, with more than 1,900 stores slated for closure and a legacy auctioned off in pieces. The moment to reclaim its soul had passed, not because the world no longer wanted to make things, but because Radio Shack had forgotten how to help them do it. The Radio Shack name, once a shorthand for possibility, drifted even further from its roots in the digital afterlife. In 2022, the brand reappeared on a different kind of marketplace, not for resistors or soldering irons, but for a cryptocurrency called Radio Shack Swap. Promised as a new frontier, the token launch drew quick attention, but not for innovation. The SEC soon flagged the project for misleading investors, and by 2025, the scheme unraveled into a fraud case that left nostalgia as collateral damage. The brand that once helped people build things was now reduced to a speculative asset, a ghost traded on the winds of hype and memory. Yet, far from Wall Street and online exchanges, another version of Radio Shack quietly survived. In Latin America, the Unicomer Group reopened stores under the old name, stocking useful appliances, basic electronics, and offering real repair services. These shops may not have the cluttered bins or the hum of soldering irons, but they still promise something tangible, a place where technology is a tool, not just a transaction. The feeling is different, but the idea lingers that a store can still help people do more with what they have. Even if the American dream of Radio Shack was lost to speculation, somewhere the original promise flickers on. Today, most retail promises convenience, not capability. When a company trades its soul for sameness, it erases the feeling that made it matter. Radio Shack's shelves are empty, but the hunger to build and understand remains. In the end, the real product was always possibility.